The automatic doors of Lakeside Regional hissed open, slicing the Monday morning chaos with a strange, surgical silence. Phones stopped ringing. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. A nurse dropped a clipboard, the plastic clatter echoing like thunder down the sterile hallway. And there he stood. A German shepherd, drenched from muzzle to tail, panting heavily with blood trailing behind him like paint on linoleum. His paws were torn raw, bits of gravel stuck in the fur. But it wasn't just the dog that froze the ER, it was what he carried. Slumped across his back like a sack of damp laundry was a little girl, 7 or 8 maybe. Her arms hung limp, head lolled to one side, soaked in crimson. Her white shirt was ripped, one sneaker missing. The dog's muscles shook under her weight, but he didn't flinch. His ears stayed low, his eyes locked forward with a desperation that silenced the room. No leash, no owner, no sound, just blood and silence. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Nurse Rachel Porter dropped her coffee without realizing it. Liquid splashed across her scrubs, but she didn't blink. Something deep and instinctual stirred in her gut. Not fear, not even shock. Something maternal, urgent. She stepped forward slowly, palms out, crouching like she might with a wild animal. "Hey there, buddy. I'm here to help, okay?" The shepherd's lips twitched, a low rumble in his throat. Not a threat, more like a warning fueled by exhaustion and instinct. His whole body trembled. Rachel's voice softened to a whisper. "You brought her here, didn't you?" The dog's eyes met hers. There was something human in them, some desperate flicker of trust. He staggered back one step, just enough. Rachel lunged. She scooped the girl into her arms, nearly buckling from the weight and panic surging in her chest. Blood seeped into her sleeves. "Get me a gurney now," she shouted. "Pediatric trauma team to Bay 2. Doctors and nurses snapped out of their trance. The emergency engine roared to life. Shouts, running feet, pagers blaring. Dr. Malik Evans appeared at Rachel's side, his military training kicking in with sharp focus. "What do we have?" he asked, already gloving up. "Severe blood loss. Pulse is thready. She's ice cold. No ID." They vanished into the trauma room like a wave, the doors swinging shut behind them. And the dog, still dripping wet, still bleeding, paced outside the doors, whining softly, pressing his nose to the cold glass every time a monitor beeped or a nurse passed through. Nora Spencer, the ER's veteran head nurse, came storming up, her eyes locking on the animal like he was a lawsuit waiting to happen. "Whose dog is this? Why is it in my ER?" "Not now, Nora," Dr. Evans barked as he slipped through the trauma doors. "That dog just saved a life. Probably 2. He's bleeding all over the floor." Rachel reappeared, breathless. "Let him stay." Rachel. He won't leave her. He brought her here. He carried her. Nora opened her mouth, but something about Rachel's face, pale, eyes wet but steady, made her stop. Security hovered near, unsure. Rachel turned to them. "If he goes, I go." There was a pause. Then one of the guards, older, kind-eyed, stepped back and gave a quiet nod. The shepherd lay down against the trauma room wall, his side heaving, his eyes never leaving the door. Blood from his own wounds pooled beneath him. But he didn't move. Inside, chaos. A flurry of machines and voices and tension thick enough to slice. "Her abdomen's distended, possible internal bleeding," Evans said. "Get an ultrasound stat and let's get a type and cross-match now." Rachel adjusted the IV as her hands shook. She tried to focus, but the child's face, so pale, so small, kept pulling her mind away. "What happened to you, sweet girl?" she whispered. The girl didn't answer. Her chest barely rose with each breath. Her tiny fingers twitched, but not in response, just nerves firing into the void. Back in the hall, the shepherd began to whimper low in his throat. A quiet, mournful sound. A nurse approached with a bowl of water, and he didn't touch it. He kept his eyes fixed on the room, on the door, on the space where she disappeared. Hours passed. Staff changed shifts. The rain outside turned to mist. Still, the dog didn't leave. Rachel stepped out finally, her face streaked with fatigue and something darker. She looked down at him. She's stable, for now. The shepherd blinked slowly. His ears twitched. She's fighting, Rachel added, just like you did. She slid down the wall beside him, cradling a warm blanket in her lap. The weight of the day pressed hard against her chest, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she reached out and touched the side of the dog's muzzle, where a fresh bruise was already forming. "You're not just some stray, are you?" He didn't answer, of course, but he didn't move away either. Rachel smiled, just barely. "I think I'll call you Scout." He blinked again, almost like he understood, and beside the trauma room door, with the scent of antiseptic and rain hanging in the air, the dog who had no name waited. By morning, the storm had passed, but inside Lakeside Regional, the tension hadn't. The little girl was still unconscious in ICU, hooked up to monitors and a ventilator. Doctors stabilized her vitals, but no one could say if or when she'd wake, and Scout still hadn't moved. He lay curled just outside her door, ignoring the nurses and techs that stepped around him. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl's room, flinching slightly every time the monitor let out a new beep. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just waited. Rachel stepped around the corner with a fresh cup of coffee and crouched beside him. She noticed how stiffly he shifted when he adjusted his weight. "You're hurting too, huh?" she murmured, brushing a hand across his fur. It was matted and sticky with dried blood. Up close, she could see a gash on his back leg and raw pads on his paws. He didn't pull away from her touch. "I told them your name's Scout," she whispered, trying on a smile. "Hope that's all right." Scout blinked, just once. Rachel looked up as Detective Henry Wolfe approached, his coat still damp from the morning dew. His gray mustache twitched as he took in the scene. Scout, the girl, the beeping machines. "So, this is the hero dog," he said. Rachel nodded. "No ID, no microchip. Just showed up carrying her on his back like he knew where to go." Wolfe squinted. "Dogs don't do that by accident." Scout raised his head at the sound of a wolf's voice but stayed quiet. "He's got the bearing of a working dog," Wolfe added, kneeling slowly. "Military, maybe. Search and rescue, at least." Rachel glanced toward the ICU window. She hasn't said a word. No ID either. Her clothes are ripped, and there are old bruises on her ribs. Faded, like she's been through hell long before last night. Wolfe stood. "I'll get the Rangers involved. If this dog came from the woods, we can trace him back." 2 hours later, Ranger Josie Martinez pulled her SUV into the hospital lot. She was short, stocky, and sharp-eyed, with a calmness that came from years of tracking wild things that didn't want to be found. She walked into the lobby, boots squeaking on the linoleum. "Which one of you has a trail for me?" she asked, hands on her hips. Scout, from his post at the door, stood slowly and padded over to her. He sniffed once at her boots, then looked up at her with tired eyes. Josie knelt and examined him carefully. "You've seen some miles, haven't you, boy?" She brushed a thumb over the leather strap around his neck. No tag, no stamp, just age and wear. Wolfe handed Josie a flash drive. Security pulled footage. He came out of the woods about 50 yards east of the loading dock, carrying her like a damn rescue stretcher. Josie raised her eyebrows but didn't comment. She simply said, "Let's follow it back." An hour later, Josie, Wolf, and 2 local deputies stood at the edge of the forest line. Scout moved between the trees ahead of them, limping slightly but determined. He stopped every now and then to sniff the ground, then look back at them like, "Well, you coming or not?" It took nearly 40 minutes of careful tracking, muddy terrain, thorny brush, and fading blood droplets to find it. The clearing, a makeshift campsite, long abandoned, with a torn tarp barely hanging from a branch, cold ashes in a fire pit, a small, shattered burner phone lying in the dirt, blood smeared on a fallen log, and beside it, Wolf's chest tightened, a child's pink sneaker, caked in mud. Josie pulled out her phone and snapped photos. "Someone was holed up here," she muttered, "recently." Carved into the bark of a nearby tree were 3 words, jagged and uneven, "No going back." Wolf read it aloud. "Creepy son of a gun." A folded, torn map lay under a rock near the fire pit. Josie opened it, revealing a red circle around Hickory Falls, a small town about 40 miles west. "This wasn't random," she said. "This guy planned something." Back at the hospital, Rachel stood beside Abby's bed, checking the monitors again. The bruises across the girl's torso made her sick to her stomach. She hadn't told the others, but some of them were shaped like handprints. A Scout whined softly from his usual place near the door. When one of the machines gave a sudden beep, he jumped to his feet, alert, staring into the room until it quieted again. "Is he always like this?" Nora asked skeptically, arms crossed. "Every time her heart rate spikes, he reacts," Rachel replied without looking. "Like he's reading the machines." Nora shook her head. "I'm telling you. It's a matter of time before administration steps in. That dog's a liability." Rachel turned to her, face blank. "He's the reason she's alive." "You want to adopt him too while you're at it?" Nora scoffed. Rachel didn't flinch. Maybe. At that moment, Wolf pushed through the door, face serious. He approached Rachel and glanced toward the girl behind the glass. "Got a match on her," he said. "Missing child alert from 3 days ago. Name's Abigail Whitmore, age 7, from up near Hickory Falls." Rachel swallowed. "Family?" "Mother filed the report. Said the mom's ex-boyfriend, Roy Beckett, picked Abby up from school pretending she had a dentist appointment. They haven't seen her since." Rachel's blood ran cold. Wolf continued, "And here's the kicker. Roy Beckett has a long list of priors. Assault. Kidnapping charges dropped on a technicality, a real piece of work." Josie entered behind him, brushing dirt off her jacket. "There's more. That dog, he didn't just stumble onto her. He was watching that campsite, guarding her. There were 2 beds, one for her, one he'd carved out for himself." Rachel looked down at Scout, who met her eyes again without blinking. "This dog knew," Josie said. "He's not a stray, he's a survivor." The hallway was still when the whisper came. Rachel had fallen asleep in a chair just outside ICU, Scout curled up beside her, his breathing slow, but never truly resting. Somewhere down the hall, a vending machine hummed. The hospital lights buzzed low. It was the kind of stillness that made you hold your breath without realizing it. Then it happened. "Scout." The sound was so faint, Rachel almost thought she dreamed it. But Scout's ears perked first. He stood up in one swift, limping motion, nose pressed to the ICU glass. Rachel blinked the sleep from her eyes and turned just as the monitor in Abby's room blinked again. This time, steady, stronger. The girl's eyes fluttered open. Her lips moved, and again she whispered, barely audible, "Scout." Rachel burst into the room, heart pounding. "Abby, can you hear me?" The little girl blinked slowly. Her gaze slid toward the window where Scout stared, unmoving. Her lips trembled. "He saved me," she whispered. Tears rushed to Rachel's eyes. She glanced toward the door and waved to the nurse on call. "Page Dr. Evans. Now." Later that morning, Detective Wolf and Dr. Elise Monroe, a child psychologist, sat quietly with Abby in a sunlit room away from the bustle. Scout lay on the floor beside her chair, his head resting on her feet like a living blanket. Elise kept her voice soft. "Abby, it's okay now. You're safe. We're just here to listen." Abby's eyes were tired, but focused. She glanced at Scout, then at Wolf. "He told me my mom was in an accident. Roy," she said slowly. "He picked me up from school. I didn't think it was weird. He used to come over a lot." "What happened after that?" Elise asked gently. "He drove forever. Then we went into the woods. He said we were starting a new life." Abby's small hands fidgeted in her lap. Scout nudged one gently with his nose. "He got mean," she continued. "Said the trees were watching us, said I was lying to him." Rachel stood behind the observation glass, fists clenched. Every word out of that child's mouth was a punch to the chest. "He hit me, a lot, told me I wasn't going back." She paused. "Scout came on the second night, I don't know where from. He just showed up. I was crying. He licked my face and laid next to me." Wolf leaned forward. "Did Roy hurt Scout too?" Abby nodded. "When Scout growled at him, Roy hit him with a stick, hard. I screamed. Then I blacked out." Her eyes filled with tears. "But Scout, he didn't leave me. He carried me. I could feel his back under me even when I couldn't see." Outside the room, Wolf pulled out his phone. "We've got what we need. He's on the move again." Roy Beckett hadn't made it far. Ranger Josie Martinez had picked up surveillance from a gas station on the edge of town. The timestamp was just 4 hours old. Roy had shaved, changed into hospital scrubs, and was carrying a duffel bag with a child's drawings sticking out of the zipper. "He's on foot," she told Wolf, "probably trying to get into the hospital." "Why?" "He knows she's alive now. He's going to try to disappear or shut her up. Either way, we need to lock that place down." Wolf cursed under his breath and radioed for a full perimeter sweep. Back at the hospital, Scout refused to leave Abby's room. Even when a handler from animal control showed up with a leash and a carrier, he wouldn't budge. He growled once, low and soft, but with enough edge to freeze the handler in place. Rachel stepped in quickly. "He's not going anywhere, not without her." "You can't keep him here," the handler insisted. "He's not licensed. He's injured. He could be a liability." "I don't care if he's never been licensed. He's her lifeline." Scout looked up at Rachel, almost as if he understood every word. Dr. Evans entered and glanced between them. "Let him stay. If anyone asks, he's on official therapy duty." The handler backed off. Rachel smiled down at Scout. "See that? You've got a title now." By late afternoon, the hospital was buzzing. News vans lined the parking lot. Someone had leaked Scout's photo, mud-covered, blood-streaked, the girl limp on his back, and the internet exploded. He was on local headlines. "Miracle dog carries girl to safety." Rachel hated the cameras, but Abby didn't seem to notice. She was talking more, drawing again, eating small bites of applesauce, always with Scout's head on her lap. That night, Rachel sat with Dr. Evans in the staff lounge, both of them too wired to sleep. "She's strong," Evans said, sipping black coffee. "You wouldn't think it, looking at her, but that girl's got steel in her spine." Rachel nodded, and Scout, "He's not just a dog, he's something else." There was a long silence. Then she added quietly, "I had a daughter once, for 10 weeks. Evans looked at her, softening. "I never thought I'd feel that kind of protection again," Rachel whispered. "But when Scout watches over her, it's like he's carrying us both." Just before midnight, the call came in. A patrol officer spotted a man matching Roy's description 2 blocks from the hospital, moving fast, wearing medical scrubs. He had something in his hand, a knife. It happened so fast that later, people would struggle to recount it in the right order. The hospital had begun winding down for the night. Floors were quieter, hallways darker. The media vans outside had thinned, their reporters gone in search of rest or the next breaking headline. But inside the walls of Lakeside Regional, trouble was already moving. Roy Beckett walked through the side entrance like he belonged there. Hospital scrubs, ID badge stolen from a break room, hair cut short, beard shaved clean, a clipboard in hand and eyes that didn't blink. No one stopped him. No one asked who he was. He moved with purpose, the kind that only looks normal when you're not paying attention. Scout noticed. He was asleep at Abby's bedside when his ears twitched. He raised his head, sniffed the air, and growled, low, guttural, unmistakable. Rachel, sitting in the armchair near the foot of the bed, looked up from her notepad. "What is it, boy?" Then she heard it too, footsteps, too quick, too direct. She moved toward the door just as it opened, and Roy stepped inside. Everything in her froze. For a second, no one moved. Roy's eyes landed on Abby, her tiny body asleep under hospital lights, and something dark flickered across his face. Rachel stepped in front of her. "You need to leave, right now." Roy raised his hand, and the glint of a knife caught the light. Scout erupted. He launched forward with a sound that was half snarl, half roar. He hit Roy square in the chest, knocking him back into the wall. The clipboard clattered to the floor. The knife slipped from Roy's grip as Scout sank his teeth into the man's forearm. Roy screamed. Rachel hit the emergency button on the wall. Alarms shrieked to life. Down the hall, 2 nurses screamed as uniformed officers sprinted toward the sound. Scout didn't let go. Roy fought him, punching wildly, but Scout held on, his teeth locked into muscle and bone. Roy dragged them both backward into the hallway, blood splattering against the walls. "Drop the weapon!" a voice bellowed. Officers tackled Roy to the ground. It took 3 of them to pull Scout off. The shepherd finally let go, stumbling backward, blood on his muzzle, one leg shaking badly beneath him. Rachel rushed out and dropped to his side. "Scout, it's okay, you did it." Abby had woken in the chaos, eyes wide, clutching the bed rail as if it were the only solid thing in the world. When she saw Scout, her voice cracked. "Scout!" He turned at the sound. His body wobbled, and he dropped to his side. A trail of blood followed him. An hour later, Roy Beckett was in custody. They found a duffel bag hidden in the hospital stairwell. Inside were fake documents, stolen meds, and a folder filled with Abby's drawings. The one on top showed her and Scout under a tree. In the corner, the words, "My real friend." Detective Wolf stood over Roy's holding cell, jaw tight. "You're not going anywhere this time." Back upstairs, Scout lay in an exam room, hooked up to fluids. His leg had a deep gash, and the vets suspected a cracked rib from the earlier escape. Internal bleeding wasn't ruled out. The animal control officer paced nearby, arms crossed. "We're not equipped for this kind of surgery. He's not registered, and he's technically still a stray." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Bill it to me." The woman blinked. "What?" "Bill it to me," Rachel repeated. "I don't care what it costs. He saved her life twice." "But, no but?" Rachel stepped closer, fire in her voice. "He's not just a dog, he's family." The woman nodded reluctantly and made the call. Down the hall, a new storm was brewing. Child services had arrived. 2 agents with stiff smiles and sad eyes. "We'll be taking Abigail into temporary foster care," one of them said. "It's standard protocol after hospitalization." Rachel looked toward Abby's room. "She's not going anywhere without Scout. I'm afraid animals can't be. Animals can't. She's 7. Her body's covered in bruises. She just watched the only protector she's had be carried off bleeding." Rachel snapped. "You want to traumatize her again tonight?" The agents exchanged glances. "We'll revisit placement in the morning." That night, Abby refused to sleep anywhere but beside Scout. The staff pulled together a blanket and cot beside his recovery crate. The girl curled up on the floor, one hand resting through the bars on Scout's paw. Rachel sat nearby, watching over them both. The hospital around them buzzed quietly, machines beeping, feet shuffling, lives being saved. But in that little corner of ICU, the world slowed down. Scout's breathing was shallow but steady. Abby's eyes finally closed, and Rachel, tears slipping quietly down her cheek, whispered into the dark, "You're not just her hero. You're mine, too." Scout didn't die that night, but he came close. The surgeons worked on him for nearly 3 hours. A torn ligament, cracked rib, internal bleeding near the spleen. Rachel never left the waiting room, not even to sit. Abby, curled up in a chair wrapped in a blanket, didn't say a word. She just held one of Scout's bandages the vet tech had handed her and stared at the doors. When the vet finally emerged, pale and exhausted, she looked at Rachel and said, "He's a fighter. You've got one tough dog." Rachel broke down in silent tears. Abby leaned into her, still gripping the bandage. Scout pulled through. Weeks passed. Not all of it was smooth. Scout had to be crated during his recovery, something that made him restless and miserable. The vet said short walks only, but he kept trying to follow Abby into every room. Rachel had to gate off areas in the house just to slow him down. He whined at night if he couldn't see her. And Abby, though healing physically, wrestled with new battles, nightmares, sudden silences, clinging to Rachel without warning, and always needing Scout nearby. One night, Rachel found her curled in the laundry room, Scout resting beside her with his head over her lap. "What are you doing in here, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Abby looked up, red-eyed. "The shadows, they move." Rachel knelt, heart cracking. "They can't hurt you now, baby. You're safe here." Abby sniffled. "Only if Scout's here, too." Rachel nodded and sat with her on the cold tile floor. Scout nestled between them like a living wall. The day the foster paperwork came through, Child Services arrived with 2 folders and an official tone. Rachel signed everything with steady hands, though her heart thudded like a war drum. The woman across the table, a kind-faced caseworker named Melissa, cleared her throat. "There is one more matter we should address," she said, flipping to the back page, "regarding the animal." Rachel's shoulders tensed. "Scout," she corrected. "His name is Scout." "Of course," Melissa said. "Legally, since he was unclaimed and not microchipped, the city has no jurisdiction, but—" Abby cut in from across the room. "He's my family." Melissa blinked. Abby stepped forward, chin up in a way that reminded Rachel of someone much older. "He saved me when no one else did. You can't separate family. That's what you told me last time." Melissa looked from Abby to Rachel, then down at her papers. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, softly, "You're right. He stays." Scout's wounds healed slowly, but his spirit never dulled. He learned to move with more caution, limping less as weeks passed. And in that time, something remarkable happened. Abby started laughing again. It began with little things. A poorly drawn picture of Scout in a superhero cape taped to the fridge. Her shouting, "Fetch!" in the backyard even when Scout wasn't allowed to run. A giggle when Scout licked peanut butter off her cheek. By the third week, she was riding her bike down the driveway, Scout trotting behind her, wearing a red bandana. Rachel stood at the edge of the porch, phone in hand, recording every second like it was gold. One Friday afternoon, Ranger Josie Martinez knocked on their door, holding a brown envelope under her arm. Her uniform was a little more relaxed now, sleeves rolled up. She grinned as Rachel let her in. "You're not going to believe what I dug up," she said, handing Rachel the envelope. Inside was a faded photo of a younger Scout, sitting tall next to a FEMA handler in a blue jacket. His coat was cleaner, his ears sharper, but his eyes were the same. Steady, alert, quietly brave. His name was Valor, Josie explained. Search and rescue unit based out of Colorado, deployed during the big sky floods. He went missing during a mudslide, presumed dead. Rachel stared at the photo, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wasn't done yet." Josie nodded. "Guess not." They sat on the porch steps sipping sweet tea as Abby and Scout played under the maple tree. Abby had made an obstacle course out of cones and overturned pots. Scout, ever patient, endured each command with the grace of a seasoned pro. Rachel watched them, tears stinging her eyes. He carried her out of that forest like he'd trained for it his whole life. He probably did, Josie said, but I think he stayed for something more. Rachel smiled. "Family?" Josie lifted her glass. "To the kind that finds us." That evening, Rachel showed Abby the photo. The girl studied it quietly. "His name was Valor?" Rachel nodded. "Before, when he worked with rescue teams." Abby looked at Scout, lying nearby on his favorite blanket, eyes half closed. "Do you want to be Valor again?" she asked him. Scout raised his head at her voice, tail thumping once. She giggled. "I think you're still Scout. That's who found me. That's who carried me." Rachel wrapped an arm around her. "Scout it is." On the first day of summer, they drove to the lake. Rachel packed the sandwiches and juice boxes. Abby brought a stick for Scout. Noah, now a near-permanent fixture at the house, had a slingshot he wasn't technically allowed to use but always carried anyway. They found a spot under a sycamore tree, shaded and quiet. Rachel spread a blanket while the kids raced to the water. Scout followed, barking once as Abby waved the stick. "Go get it!" she yelled, and launched it into the shallows. He charged forward, water splashing around him, tail high, proud. When he returned, soaked and smiling, Abby threw her arms around his neck. "You're not just my best friend," she whispered into his fur. "You're my always." As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the lake in amber and rose, Rachel sat back and breathed in the peace she never thought she'd find. She looked at the two kids chasing each other through the grass, Scout bounding beside them like time had rewound. No shadows, no blood, just freedom. And she thought, sometimes home isn't where you're from. It's where someone waits for you, fights for you, carries you when you can't walk. Scout turned, as if he'd heard her thought, and trotted up the hill toward her. He sat at her feet, resting his head on her knee. Rachel ran her fingers through his fur and whispered, "Thank you." Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they walk on four legs and carry you when you can't carry yourself.